I'd like to make a hard pivot right now and talk a little bit about how you wrote the blueprint for 2020 and 2013 in the book Remote. I did not read it in 2013, but we've been living some of those philosophies. And when I read it, kind of like, oh my God, and we've seen what has happened to businesses all over the world because of COVID. You wrote this idea that decentralizing your office, your operation, to prevent it from catastrophic failure if one system goes down. And you're making a case for distributing the workload across people, having written that in 2013 and seeing the economic devastation, not even to talk about the health impact that COVID has made. 7 years prior to this happening, you already kind of wrote about it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, obviously we never could have predicted this terrible couple of years. Remote working ultimately is about building resilience in an organization, the ability to work from anywhere, anytime, and hiring people from all over the place. Remote working is not just working locally far away or far apart. It's actually a fundamentally different approach to work. It's a more trustworthy way of working. It's more about asynchronous communication than real time, especially as you go across time zones. You can't have real-time conversations with people who are 7 time zones. I mean, you can. It's much harder to synchronize schedules that way, and people end up working longer and later because you're pulling people into conversations when it's nighttime for them, and it's a very unhealthy approach. So I think there's a lot of good fundamental ideas behind remote work, even if you're working locally, to work asynchronously and to trust people more. But it is about resiliency. And I think that what ended up happening here with COVID is that a lot of companies found that they weren't that resilient, and that if their office went away, they would be scrambling and they wouldn't know how to work. If they only relied on in-person meetings and they thought there was no other way to work than that, and they couldn't have them all of a sudden, they were caught flat-footed and didn't know what to do. Remote working just gives you another option. That's at the fundamental level. But the other thing that's great about remote working is you get to hire people all over the world, and you're not limiting yourself to hiring people just, within 30 miles of your zip code or your home office or whatever. You can hire incredibly great people all over the place, and they are everywhere. There's a tendency in the tech industry to fight all over the same people, that there's this talent war for whatever, for the best 50 or whatever. I don't buy it. There's another 10,000 that are exceptionally good. There's another million that are exceptionally good in other places. Go out and find them. And that's what we've always done. We've never tried to fight the talent war. We just find wonderful people all over the place. And the only way you can do that is if you have a remote working culture where you're not afraid to hire someone who lives 4,000 miles away or 7 time zones away. We weren't prescient here. We didn't see the coming terrible COVID pandemic situation. We'd always worked this way, and we thought it was a valuable way to work and just another skill to have. And I think it makes companies more resilient because look, let's say you've worked remotely now for 2 years and your company decides, we actually prefer working together. We all have to get back together. Okay, fine. So you pull everyone back into the office, and then maybe the building is sold and your lease is canceled and you don't have a new office space to work out of for a year. Now you're going to feel like, well, we can get by. We're going to be okay because we've learned how to work remotely. Like, we have resiliency here. It's not just about pandemics. It can be all sorts of other reasons why you can't get together. I think that's just a good skill for a company to have.
I think in 2013, it was a radical philosophy, a way of thinking that would never work for most companies. Like, you guys are very unique in that you're a software company and you can do things remotely, and you have enough profit margin relative to overhead that you can do whatever you want. And we saw the resistance at the beginning, and then acceptance and adaptation afterwards, where gigantic corporations were saying, moving forward, we're no longer requiring you to show up to work anymore. And they found what you wrote about, the kind of hypothesis that once people get over it, they're actually more productive, more effective, and you can trust people to do work at home. You need to support them. You have to have systems in place, but it's fascinating to me that it all kind of really played out the way that it was written.
Well, the other thing is that to me, it's more respectful at a human level. If you're forced to live near where you work, you have to close a lot of options off. Maybe your partner has to move because they have a job in another city. Maybe they're like, I have some friends who are teachers, and they're very specific teachers, university teachers in a very specific topic. And there's only like 3 of those departments like across the country. And if a job pops up somewhere in Connecticut, they got to go there to get that job. But their partner, they lived in, I don't know, let's say it's San Diego. And now like someone has to lose their job because they can't live near where their other job was. So their partner it's like, there's so many fundamental life decisions that come with where you work when you're locked into a place. And what's nice about remote working is that you can choose to live your life and live wherever you want within reason. You need to have a certain overlap with your team and everything. Work becomes less influential on your life, even though in some ways you feel like it has more influence because now you're free to do other things. But that's actually because work has less influence on your life. And I think that's a really healthy thing. Now, granted, Not everybody can do this. There's many, many jobs. You work in the restaurant industry, you work in a factory, you work with manual labor, you assemble things. You have to be there at the job site to do the thing, obviously. But if you're an information worker or creative or many, 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 many industries now, you can choose to live where you want. If you want to choose to live in a new place, you don't lose your job and the company doesn't lose you. There's so much good that comes from that. I think people's lives open up. And I think it's nice to have employees who don't feel locked down into a certain thing, to a certain place anymore. They feel more open to living the life they want to live. I think that's good to have employees like that. And it's good to, as a company, to support that.